going to get started and move along with our next presenter. If you've been attending SWAVO for like the last year and a half now, you know that I've been highlighting our certified assurances. I feel like not everyone abides by a grant, but these are kind of best practices that come down from like Office of Victims of Crime and Violence Against Women. And they really are there to make our services better. And so today we decided to focus on presenting to your governing board, and we invited Danette and then poor Nathaniel. I just happened to be talking to him as he was like getting ready to go present to his board. And he's like, oh, it's recorded, you can watch it. And I did. And I was like, this is amazing. He's doing a great job. So I said, Danette, you know who you should find? You should get Nathaniel. And so they are here to present on presenting to your governing board.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for sticking with us to the end of the day. As Rochelle mentioned, one of the things that we've been bringing to SWAVO, her team has been, is little pieces of the certified assurances. So I hope that today's, a lot of you have probably been doing governing board reports for a long time, but I hope that you'll go home energized with some new ideas, or if you haven't been doing governing board reports or haven't been involved in them, that you'll go back to your place of work and talk to the person who has and share with them these ideas and get involved in these really neat opportunities. So this piece of training is from Section B of your grant conditions about certified assurances. Report to your governing entity. The grantee shall give 2 reports during the program year to the local, state, or nonprofit governing entity, such as the City Council, County Commission, or Board of Directors receiving the grant funds. The reports will include crime categories under which crime victims are served, types of services provided, and program accomplishments as described under contract, record of providing effective services in the quarterly report. Grant-funded personnel shall participate in the report presentations, and completion of this requirement shall be verified and reported in a quarterly progress report. So that's the little paragraph from your certified assurances, right? So what does that mean? What is the bare minimum that you need to do for your governing board report? It needs to be twice a year, and you should be sharing the status of your program. So that includes how you're doing on your goals and objectives. So what percentage you've met throughout the year, how that's going, if you're meeting or exceeding those goals. And we'd also like you to talk about the utilization of funds, how that is going for your program, if you're ahead or behind schedule on spending out funds. And you notice in the certified insurances, it said that it shall involve the grant funded staff. So what we don't want is just the executive director each time to say VOCA's going fine, here's a quick report, or your chief of police to report for you. We really want the grant funded staff to be involved in these governing board reports. And then the documentation shall be uploaded to the grant management system. And talking to the grant analysts, we really love it if you email it to us as well. So if it's, we love for you to upload it in the file section, that's very helpful, but we don't always know that you've done those governing board reports. And so when you do them, let us know, because we love to see those reports as well. One of the questions that frequently comes up is, how do I document that? And it can be documented in a variety of ways, which can be the agenda from the meeting, minutes is great, or if you do reports that you distributed to board members, we'd love to see that too. In the case where Rochelle mentioned Nathaniel from Moab City, his was a YouTube video that was shared with her. She shared it with me and I watched it and I'm like, this is really great. So if you have something great like that, we'd love to see it. Your grant analyst and the program management team is really interested in what you're doing. So it's a way to highlight that. So this is the bare minimum that you need to do for your governing board report. And I think that's what, for the most part, people have been doing for a very long time. But today, what we want to really highlight is how you can leverage this opportunity to do your report to support your grant-funded program. So, you know, this is part of the certified assurances, and you have agreed to do that. But really, these are great opportunities that you can use for your own benefit. And I want to talk about some of those ideas today. So one of the things that we hear a lot on site visits and when we're talking to people is, we don't have a lot of support from our county. I don't have support from our board of directors. I don't feel a lot of support from them. So these are opportunities where you can say, I need to get into your meetings with you. And so it's an opportunity twice a year to get in with them and strengthen your relationship with them. We want them to know you and we want you to know them as well. So use this to your advantage. And while you're in front of them, talk to them about what your program looks like. Almost always when you do a presentation about your programs and the services that you're doing, you're going to have your city council, your county commission or your board of directors say, I didn't know you guys were doing that. I didn't know that you guys were starting this new thing, or that's really interesting. And so it helps you do that ongoing education with them about what your programs are looking like. It's a really good opportunity to share success stories and what you guys are doing and get that like emotional connection from, the boards are usually kind of removed from those grassroots, boots on the ground, direct services to victims, but it's a way to connect with them about what's going on. So, and while you're doing that, you can talk about how those success stories are so vital to your community. So remember that you are a part of your community. That should be the focus, how your program, how your victim advocates, your case managers, your the different services, the different grant funded staff are such a vital resource to the survivors and to your community. We want them to have that connection as well. But as you're doing that, please remember that your board of directors and your commissioners and city councils are part of your community. And so a story that you might tell, they might be able to connect the dots and figure out who that is. So be very careful as you share success stories that you're not sharing any personally identifying information during those times. So one thing that we really want to focus on today is when you're talking to your boards and your commissions, give them a budget forecast. So for those of you that have been involved in LaVoca and BOW and SAS World for a few years, know that budgets have been changing and the amount of funds that have been dispersed has been severely limited. So it's your guys' responsibility to let your cities, your nonprofits, your counties know that so that they can forecast for their budgets as well. We want to create a culture of accountability and buy-in and financial support for your program. Remember that you guys are nonprofit or city or county employees. You guys aren't VOCA employees that are like placed in a county. Remember, this is something that has always been the case, but it's especially crucial that people understand right now that VOCA and VAWA and SAS supports victim service programs, but it's never intended to be the sole or the primary supporter of programs. So sometimes we'll hear from people, well, what do we do about this growth or needing new people or cost of living increases? And those are great conversations to be having with your board of directors, with your governing boards, is that there needs to be a financial buy-in and some support from them as well. And remember that no program should be solely supported by grant funds. So we're reminding you so that you can remind them, and then those conversations can be ongoing. And hopefully as you're sharing those success stories and how vital you are to your community, that they also see how busy you all are and all the great work that you're doing, and they help you find financial backing so that you can grow in your own communities with the support of ULBC funded programs. And part of that is making sure that your programs are part of the city budget, are part of the county budget, that you are included in the budget review process, that you are remembered and grouped in as part of your community's employees and included in those really important budget conversations that are ongoing. I know that these can be hard conversations to have, but that's where we start with the very first one, which is strengthening that relationship with your board and getting that buy-in and that support from them. So those are like some of the ways that we hope that we can look at the opportunity to do a governing board report in a different way, instead of just as checking a box and getting on the agenda and saying things are going fine, that you can go in there with a different purpose, with a new excitement for building those relationships and can kind of grow. So there's kind of two main types of governing board reports. We kind of have a lot of nonprofit organizations and then people that are reporting to cities and councils. And so I'm going to talk just a little bit about some successes that I had as I was reporting to a nonprofit board of directors. And then Nathaniel is going to talk about an experience he's had recently with his city council. So prior to coming to UOVC, I worked in victim services for about 10 years. And I started off as a victim advocate and then eventually was a director of a shelter. And when I was new into this work, I remember being asked to participate in board reports, and I would be just really terrified that I would have to go and talk about my program in front of the board. And I saw them as like kind of intimidating and scary. But then once I realized that they're volunteers too, that they're people from my community that cared about the work that I was doing, and they really were interested in doing that, I saw it in a different light. And so once I took on a different role, one of the things that I always focused on is getting my different staff members in front of the board of directors. Nonprofits have a really high turnover rate in both their staff and their board of directors. So there's always someone new. And so helping them build that connection between each other so that my board always knew what my nonprofit was doing and understood how hard the staff was working. I utilized a few different methods during my time there. I tried different things. I would always present on how our goals were going, the financial outlook. I used those opportunities to get like COLA increases at one point, or to talk about budget shortfalls and all those types of things. But another thing I tried is I had a cool little spreadsheet that had every staff member's name, their title, and then just like 2 lines of what they did. And I would try to highlight a few people in a different program every single time so that they could be connected to the board of directors. And I would just drag different people with me to those meetings. And it was kind of fun. I think my favorite report to the board that I ever did was probably the last one that I did before I left my nonprofit. And I really wanted to hand off to the board and to the rest of our management team how much I appreciated and cared about the staff that was doing that work. So I made a PowerPoint. We had just had a retreat and pictures of everyone, and I wanted them to see their faces. And I talked about every single program, and I tried to find a success for each single one of them that year and share that with them. And it was a neat experience for me. And I guess the message that I really want to leave is that using these opportunities to get in front of those like decision makers and those people that are providing oversight to your agency can be really powerful opportunities if we utilize them in really thoughtful and with a lot of well thought out intent, and we can have really good outcomes from that. So that is where I'm going to turn the time over to Nathaniel. But before I do, I just want to tell you guys just a little bit about him, because he's one of my agencies that I am the analyst over. But he was drawn to Moab 15 years ago to work for the national parks. And during his career as a park ranger, he developed strong ties to his community, and he had pivotal experiences helping people in crisis and working alongside the local victim advocate, making him the perfect person to take over the victim advocate program in the spring of 2022. Nathaniel is currently the Victim Assistance Manager, and it's a collaborative project between Moab PD, Grand County Sheriff, Grand County Attorney's Office, and the Children's Justice Center. So he has a really big role that he plays, and he's brand new, and he did an amazing governing board report, and we were just so excited. We just want Nathaniel to share a little bit of that with you guys.
Nathaniel, before you start, let me enter your PowerPoint. Is that okay?
Yes.
So we can see his face.
Of course.
Okay.
That seems unnecessary.
No. And now, just because of that, I'm putting in full screen.
Well, thanks. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks, Danette. As Danette said, I'm the manager of the Victim Assistance Unit, which is a little bit misleading because I'm the only one in the unit. And that's actually what I was wanting to approach the city council about. So towards the end of October, I presented to the Moab City Council, and I didn't really know going into it much about what I needed to be presenting, but I did know that my goal was going to be basically to ask for money, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. So going into it, well, let me rewind a little bit. Something that I think is really, really valuable for this kind of work when you're making these kind of presentations is having a good sense of how to successfully advocate for yourself and how to promote an idea or a concept that you're trying to win people over onto. And one of the classes I took in college, probably the single most useful class I took actually, was a really short class that was just about policy advocacy. And it was all about arguing your case to try to sway people to your line of thinking. And that's exactly what I was doing. And that class, I think learning more about policy advocacy is something that could benefit absolutely everybody. So going into it, I knew that that was going to be my goal, was to be asking for additional funding. And I knew for the most part that the city council was not like super hostile to the idea, like they're generally supportive, but sounding supportive doesn't cost anything. So actually getting money from them is a different story. So ahead of time, as much as I could about the city council members, I actually asked them to submit questions ahead of time so that I could prepare some answers and, you know, seem a little bit more credible, because I am still very new in this realm and that's challenging. And I didn't know for sure what information I needed to present. So they gave me some questions that I could prepare ahead of time. And I pulled stats from the most recent quarter because I felt like it was the best representation of how busy the program was. And I just explained how busy the program is, what the client load is, what the average workload is. I kind of described a day in the job and what calls look like, and got a little bit into the weeds about how many hours different tasks take and how long it takes working with different sorts of clients and different sorts of crimes. And I was trying to make sure that I wasn't sounding like I was whining or complaining about being overworked, but I also was very, very frank about the workload and about the fact that I'm pretty overwhelmed and that I slip a little bit further behind pretty much always. And I think that that's a tough balance to strike, not sounding like you're complaining and just being very forthcoming about the challenges. So I spoke for, I don't know, 20 minutes probably, and I'm sure we can put the link to the YouTube video. The audio quality is terrible. Their microphone, I don't think their microphone reads deep voices very well. So I guess it might be about the only part of government structure in Utah that doesn't respond well to male voices, is what I'm realizing, but that's kind of a fluke. So the audio quality is terrible, but I'm sure we can post the link to the YouTube video if you want to watch it. And I heard from the mayor after the fact that it went pretty well, and she thought that I represented and made the case very effectively. And at that city council meeting, the mayor brought up the fact that they had some funding for a part-time position that they could potentially assign to my program. And about 3 weeks later, they posted an announcement for a part-time job. So I should also probably put in a plug for that. Someone should probably come work in beautiful Moab, Utah, although it's only a part-time job, but it's for a victim advocate that'll be shared with Grand County and the city PD. So it's a very diverse job. And we're taking applications and starting the hiring process right now, but I won't go too far down that road of just trying to advertise the position. But overall, it felt like it was pretty successful. I will say that I knew going into it that it was going to be a supportive group. And I think that speaking to a governing body or a council that isn't as supportive, I would have prepared differently. And I think that's another point that's probably worth making. Really pay attention to your audience. Like if you're going to effectively communicate to different groups of people, you should probably be thinking about who you're talking to. Like if you're speaking to a room full of police officers, you're going to communicate very differently, or at least you should be communicating very differently than if you were communicating to a room full of social workers or an academic group or you know, like city council members, politicians, people like that. And so if you're tailoring your message to the audience that you know in advance that you're going to be speaking to, I think it's going to be more successful. And I definitely found that to be the case presenting to the city council. The next step is going to be presenting to the county council also to try to get more buy-in and more financial support. And I think that may be a little bit more challenging because I don't overlap with the county as much, and they don't utilize my program as heavily. So I think it may be a little bit more challenging to demonstrate the value of the program to what the sheriff's office and the county prosecutor does. I feel like that's a pretty good summary of what the presentation was. Does anybody have questions or thoughts or anything like that? Danette, anything else you want me to add?
No, Nathaniel, you did a great job. Thank you. Well, everyone, any questions in the room or online? Okay, well, we're halfway through this grant year. Go back to your agency, see if you've done a board report recently. And if you haven't, get involved. We hope that you'll take some of this energy and these ideas and, be creative as you speak to them. And I will make sure Nathaniel's YouTube video gets sent out because it was really great. So thanks, everybody. Oh, we have one question back here in the back.
If you have a question for him, can we, see if we contact him privately to ask for a little bit of feedback and how some ideas for this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we can get my email address out to the group. Danette, what's the best way to accomplish that?
Rochelle can share with the SWAVO materials and your bios in there, so we can just add your email address to that in the materials.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and throw it in chat too.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, well, thanks, everyone.
Abby, really?